Hi everyone, my name is Abida, and today I'll be talking about my thesis. Traceable and threshold ring signatures can be post-quantum secure against active adversaries. Let's start with the thesis statement. There exist traceable and threshold ring signatures that are secure against active adversaries in the random oracle or common reference string and against passive adversaries in the plain model. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this thesis statement down into two research goals, and then I will show you how I'm going to answer various aspects of those goals over three separate works. My two research goals are show a threshold ring signature scheme and prove it secure in the quantum random oracle model. Research goal 2 is to show a scheme that achieves a traceable compact ring signature in either the common reference string or random oracle model. So basically what I've done here is I've, between the thesis statement and the research goals, thrown a bunch of jargon at you. Probably none of it makes sense yet, so that's why we're going to take a step back. I'm going to give you some background, and then we can talk about how I have answered these goals. All right, so we'll take it very step by step, where I'll just start with introducing some icons to help you out when I explain the technical details, and these icons will remain constant throughout the talk. So first of all, I've already mentioned ring signatures. Now, a ring is just a set of people. So for the purposes of illustration, I'm going to have a ring of three people: Alice, Bob, and Charlie. I've also mentioned the active adversary, whom I will represent using this like skating devil figure. Now, signatures, you'll learn, need to be verified, so I'll use a check mark for verification. And then ring signatures are also anonymous within the set, so I use a question mark for that. Now I'm going to have quantum versus classical, so I use this kind of electron atom symbol for quantum and a falling apple for classical. And then finally, I talk about something called oracles, which I'll use this crystal ball imagery for. So again, we still really haven't gotten into what any of this means, but hopefully you can keep these visuals in mind as I actually start to explain the background. So I'm going to start with signature schemes so that people can understand why ring signatures are useful. I think a lot of people are actually familiar with digital signatures already. So let's suppose we just have one person, Alice. Now, Alice has a secret key that she keeps to herself, and she uses that to sign a message. Now, she can now publish that message and that signature that she made to the world. And the world has some associated verification key that they can use with the message and signature and see, oh, did it really come from Alice? Now, notice here that the signature and message are publicly verifiable. Now, there could be a scenario where Alice wants to avoid revealing her exact identity. So this is where ring signatures come in. So I told you already, a ring is a set of people. And so what Alice can do is she can sign on behalf of a ring of Alice, Bob, and Charlie. Anyone can check that the message came from one of Alice, Bob, or Charlie, but they can only determine who it was just by guessing with probability about 1/3. In general, Alice could make the anonymity set much larger, so we would say you would have a ring of n users. Good. So far I've explained signatures, and I've explained why we want what sender privacy is. So that actually tells you everything you need to know about ring signatures. Ring signatures are a way of authenticating yourself, so in other words, signing, but remaining anonymous within a set. Now, in some scenarios, that kind of like unconstrained anonymity that ring signatures give you is actually not suitable for the scenario. So one variant that we have of ring signatures is something called traceable ring signatures, which reveals a signer if they sign more than once. So, for example, if Alice speaks once, it's anonymous, but then if she speaks again, then it'll be possible to take those two signatures and any other information about the messages and the ring, and you can actually publicly trace and learn Alice's identity just because she signed a message twice. They do have to be distinct messages. Now, another variant of ring signatures is what's called threshold ring signatures. So, moving from that idea of just 1 out of 3 or 1 out of n ring signatures, we can go to T out of n threshold ring signatures. So, for example, we could have a 2 out of 3 signature where Alice and Bob both sign, and then a verifier believes that 2 distinct people from the ring signed, but the verifier can't tell exactly who it was. So it could be like Alice and Bob, Bob and Charlie, or Charlie and Alice. Let me go into ring signature security a little bit more. I've already mentioned unforgeability, or the ability to verify signatures and really be sure that it came from that person. And I've talked about anonymity within the set. So just to sum up, unforgeability means only legitimate members of the ring can create a signature. So being a legitimate member means you know one of the secret keys. Anonymity means that any outside observer cannot tell who produced the signature. In fact, even other members of the ring cannot tell who produced the signature, except they might know that it's not them. Right? So with all that in mind, I've set you up with the definition of ring signatures, threshold ring signatures, traceable ring signatures, and I've started talking about the security properties. Now, one thing that's going to be really important for my thesis is talking about how we can design a protocol to achieve those security properties. But even before we get into that, I need to talk more about what those security properties actually mean. Now, the way we actually model the security of a cryptographic protocol for ring signatures in general is we will define an adversary who has certain powers. So this adversary wants to either break the unforgeability or anonymity of the scheme. And so basically we want to ensure that no adversary can forge signatures if they don't have a secret key, and that no adversary can de-anonymize honest users. So the adversary is going to be able to access some oracles. And for example, you might want the adversary to be able to make O-sign queries, oracle queries on signatures, where the adversary just sees as many signatures as he can on messages of his choice. So this kind of captures this property that, or this real life scenario where when you make a signature, you're usually publishing it out for the world. So an adversary should be able to see lots of different signatures on various messages. And of course, he's already like a little bit powerful because he gets to choose the messages in this scenario. But we're going to talk a little bit about how to get truly active adversaries. That's not going to be quite enough. Now, the next thing I want to tell you about is post-quantum security. I gave you a description of an adversary who was making a lot of queries to an oracle. But it's not just important what he asks to the world, basically what he asks to the oracle, it also matters what he can do computationally at home. And so if we assume that this adversary has access to a quantum computer, then it changes the situation, because now the adversary can break problems, hardness of problems that would not be possible for him to break on a classical computer. So, for example, RSA is still, as far as we know, hard to it's hard to work on and solve on a classical computer, but it's easy to do on a quantum computer. So what that means for us is when we're setting up our cryptographic protocols, we need to start with assumptions that we think are post-quantum secure. So you can either start from another specific kind of problem like RSA, but make it post-quantum secure. So here I have an example of LWE, or learning with errors, which is a specific problem that uses number theoretic assumptions, and it deals with matrices in a certain kind of structure. On the other hand, I have an example like of a general cryptographic assumption, which here I have quantum one-way functions. So with a general cryptographic assumption, there's no restrictions on the look of the scheme or protocol, so to speak. We don't use the structure. So we're only using this kind of tool generically. And so for us, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up some post-quantum secure assumptions that are general, and then I will prove that my ring signature scheme is secure, assuming that these general problems are secure. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about is models in cryptography. Now, if you're only using those falsifiable assumptions that I talked about previously, like learning with errors, one-way functions, and RSA, then you would be in the plain model. This is the most desirable setting, but in some cases we might not be able to get all the properties we want if I have only the plain model. We'll actually see this in a bit, how difficult it can be. Now you can trade these assumptions and instead be in the common reference string or random oracle model. And that just changes the sort of scenario that you're in. So with the common reference string model, you have trust assumptions, meaning that there's some sort of trusted party that actually sets up some parameters of the cryptographic protocol for you, and everyone is going to use those parameters throughout every single time they want to compute one of the algorithms. So they might sign using these public parameters. The last one is this idea of a random oracle model, which assumes access to an idealized hash function that everyone can see. And for the purposes of our discussion, we just assume that this is like kind of a magical function that gives you truly random outputs for each input that someone might ask it. I want to talk a little bit more about the random oracle heuristic. The idea is that there's a public hash function that kind of behaves like a random function, as I just mentioned, and we think of it as being a black box. Now, what I have here is this picture where I have this adversary, and the random oracle is like kind of up in the sky, and the only thing that the adversary like really knows about is or can do is access H just by calling the oracle. In reality, H is a hash function. And so the adversary actually has direct access to the hash function and can compute it on his own computer. Now, in reality, if we're replacing the random oracle with a hash function, then it means that we have to consider whether the adversary can use that hash function in a quantum way. So before the work that I did on threshold ring signatures, which we'll see in a bit, other ring signature schemes that claim to be post-quantum because they used a post-quantum hard problem actually only considered classical access to the random oracle. So in my work, I showed a threshold ring signature that had quantum access to the random oracle for the first time. And so with this, we showed that it was important not only to think about whether your hardness problem was post-quantum secure, but also whether your proof technique was post-quantum secure. All right, last piece of information you need. I know that I had to give you a lot of background, but this is the last one, and now we can go into the works, is sizes of the signatures. So when a signer computes a signature on behalf of their ring, the ring is going to have a certain size. So let's say there's n people in the ring. And now that signature that they produce is just a string, and that string will have a certain length. And often it is a function of the size of the anonymity set. So if you have n people, then an O of n, you may have an O of n size signature. But the more anonymous you want to be, in other words, like the larger you want to make your set, the more difficult it becomes to justify the use of an O of n size ring signature. Now, in practice, we want our ring signatures to be compact. So if possible, we strive for O of polylog or better, with minimal assumptions regarding the hardness assumption or the model. There are O of 1 ring signatures, but they are going to use assumptions in the common reference string model. So that's going to be something that I'm going to balance throughout my work. Okay, I'm going to go into my work, which is my first work that comprises this thesis, which is threshold ring signatures, new definitions, and post-quantum security. I already talked about OSIGN giving the adversary access to an oracle that allows him to see many signatures. But there should be, in the setting of ring signatures, a way for the adversary to actually participate. So that means that the adversary could, in fact, be a member of the ring. So what that means for us is the adversary can ask for more keys to be generated. So he can basically ask that more people are added to the ring, but he can also corrupt those users and learn their secret keys, basically taking on their identities. On top of that, the one new thing that we did was we allowed something called O-register, which meant access to be able to produce his own public key and secret key pair. Now, previous works did not think about all these oracles that this adversary might have access to, which captures better the scenario that ring signatures are in. So basically, in my work, I showed for the first time a fully active adversary for threshold ring signatures. And so this also improves on work of Bender, Katz, and Morselli, which is kind of the first work that looked at different levels of strength and security. But they only looked at ring signatures, and not threshold ring signatures. So let's go ahead and talk about the scheme that I built. I'll show you how I did it. The building blocks that I used are a trapdoor commitment scheme, which is where our keys are going to come from, and Shamir secret sharing. So with a trapdoor commitment scheme, by the way, I used only general assumptions to prove my threshold ring signature. Let me explain commitment schemes very quickly. Basically, a commitment scheme allows a person to lock up a message and produce a value called a commitment. So the committer basically commits to the message and gets a commitment and an opening. And so he can produce that commitment and set it out to the world, and nobody can see basically what's inside. So the commitment is hiding. However, later on, when this person may want to open the commitment, he sends out the message and any auxiliary opening information, and that proves that the thing that he committed to, that underlying message, really is the message that he had to have. So that's this concept of binding. Now, Now, in contrast, a trapdoor commitment scheme lets the person change their mind. So basically, if they have a key, they can produce a commitment, and there's no message in here. They send this commitment out, same as before, and then later on, using their key, they can produce any message in any opening they like. So commitment schemes are hiding and binding, so are trapdoor commitment schemes. But trapdoor commitment schemes have this additional property that they have trapdoor indistinguishability, meaning it's not possible to tell whether you committed in the normal way, as we saw in the previous slide, or using this trapdoor method. Now, the next tool I want to talk about is Shamir secret sharing, which we kind of use as a fixing function. I think a lot of people actually are familiar with the fact that 2 points defines a line. So you can think of Shamir's secret sharing as kind of a box that takes in 2 points and then it determines the line, which I said f. And we know that that function pattern is f of x is equal to mx plus c. Now, in general, t plus 1 points uniquely determines a degree t polynomial. So I will show you how the signers are going to use this in the ring signature scheme. So let's look at an overview of the signature scheme. All of my signers are working together. They're going to produce real commitments for the non-signers. So remember, you need a key to produce a trapdoor commitment scheme, but anyone can produce a commitment using basically public information that the non-signers have associated to them. Now here, once they have these commitments for the non-signers, they can produce trapdoor commitments for themselves, which they use their secret key for. Now, with all of these trapdoor commitments and commitments, they can produce this value z, which is a random oracle, a hash on the message that they want to sign, and the sequence of commitments. Now, with the value z that they get from the random oracle, they can actually use all the points that they got from the non-signers, right, the things that they committed to for the non-signers, and add this 0.0z. So you'll notice here that this is the number of non-signers plus 1 point, which would give us, if you go through Shamir secret sharing, a degree of a polynomial of degree of the number of non-signers. So with one non-signer, I'm going to get a linear function, right? So here I have Charlie and the 0.0z, and that's going to give me uniquely determine f of x is equal to mx plus c. Now, once the signers have this function, it determines basically a bunch of values of y for the openings of their commitments, which they can open to using their trapdoor opening, using their key, to make sure that they are points on the line. Now, the signers are going to send over all of the points that they created. So these points, by the way, are the openings of the commitment. And they're also going to send the vector of commitments. Now, a verifier can access the random oracle and recalculate the point z, and then they'll check the point 0z, and then the point that's associated to Alice, Bob, and Charlie. Do all of these points lie on the same line? Now, because they do, if the signers did everything properly, they will be convinced that at least 2 points were made after learning 0z. But they can't figure out exactly which 2 signers it is. So this, in the end, gives you a 2 out of 3 threshold ring signature. And in general, you can do a threshold T just by allowing us to have a higher degree polynomial. Cool. Great. So now at this point, I want to talk about the anonymity proof. Now, for anonymity, basically the adversary should not be able to distinguish whether signer I or signer J signed. And in threshold ring signatures, this shakes out to whether a set A or a set B is the one that's signed. Now, for us, it's going to be enough to say the adversary can't tell if secret keys have been used or not. So if no secret keys are actually used for the signature and the adversary can't tell, then it means he can't tell which secret keys were used. So how do we go about doing this? We are going to swap out the trapdoor commitments with an honest commitment step by step. So in this picture here, I originally start with 2 signers and a non-signer, swap one of those signers into a non-signer, and then swap the remaining signer into a non-signer. Now this is possible to do if you know the point 0 z ahead of time. So for the purposes of the proof, we're able to program the RO, basically like set the points that we want to have. And that basically allows us in the proof to change the time point at which the point 0z is learned. And we can use honest commitments for everyone. So this does go step by step, and we prove that each step change is indistinguishable from the previous one. And in the end, because each swapping out is indistinguishable, it must be the case that having some signers and having no signers are indistinguishable to an adversary. Cool. So here, one more thing I want to point out. Anonymity has to do with being able to distinguish 2 things. Now, unforgeability looks really similar, except at the end, when we have an adversary try to forge a signature, they're not just distinguishing, they're actually going to produce some signature that will verify. So we are going to do something very similar. The first steps of unforgeability actually look the same in that we're going to swap every trapdoor commitment out with an honest commitment. Now, once we have no signers in the protocol at all, with all honest commitments, we show that if an adversary is able to produce a signature, it must be the case that he is breaking the binding of the commitment scheme, because there must be at least one point at which he was able to switch out what a commitment was committing to. Good. So I haven't gone into all the details because these are really like a lot of steps to go through. But the point is that I use hybrids, just indistinguishable step-by-step changes, and then finally a reduction to some hardness assumption, which in my case for unforgeability is going to be the binding of the commitment scheme. So my contribution to knowledge with this work is I generalized definitions for ring signatures to threshold ring signatures setting and allowed for that active adversary who could actually participate in the ring. It's also the first provably post-quantum secure scheme where I allowed the adversary to have quantum access to the random oracle and still prove that my scheme would be secure. Whereas previous works didn't consider this fact. And then I do answer research goal 1, which is to show a threshold ring signature scheme and prove that it is secure in the quantum random oracle model. That is exactly what I did with this work. So this will go back to my thesis statement. Part of my thesis statement says I want to show that there are threshold ring signatures that are secure against active adversaries in the random oracle or common reference string model. And so that is what I did. My next work is logarithmic size linkable threshold ring signatures in the plane model. The way we achieve threshold here uses different techniques from the previous work because we wanted to have intersigner anonymity. The signers really shouldn't need to interact just to produce a threshold. So with intersigner anonymity, the signers don't have to talk to each other. Alice can produce a signature, Bob can produce a signature, and somehow the verifiers can see that it actually came from two different people without seeing exactly who it was. This is, by the way, not possible with regular ring signatures, which are truly anonymous, which means, for example, Alice could just like sign and then sign again and then sign again, and nobody would be able to tell that it was or wasn't the same person. So intersigner anonymity is achieved by just giving a signature a deterministic part. And then given two signatures, just check if that part is equal. So whereas ring signatures really are just like truly randomized, the signatures with intersigner anonymity allow for one of the parts to be deterministic and uniquely determined by the secret keys of that signer. So now, if a verifier is given a list of signatures, he can parse out any two of them and then see if that part is the same in both signatures or not, and conclude whether it came from the same person or not. So the check is very simple, which is just if they're not equal, they're different signers, and if they are equal, they're the same signers. Now, in particular, we want to ensure that these signatures are on the same message and ring because that's going to mimic the setting of a threshold ring signature. So really, when you have everybody get together to do a threshold ring signature, it's because they've all agreed on a message and ring that they want to sign on. There is a concept of linkable ring signatures, which was previously seen in the literature. But the intersigner anonymity that we came up with allowed for linkability that was more fine-grained than previously seen. So basically what this meant was we had an additional scope on which signers could sign, and that was where the equality check was possible. So for example, if a signer were to sign a message in the scope for the mayor's office, that would allow him to do so anonymously and then later make a different message in the scope of the governor's office. Because those are like two different settings, two different scopes, those signatures would not be linked. But maybe in the context of something that you're doing for the mayor, you should only be allowed to speak once. Okay, now one thing I did not mention before, this concept of linkability means you can tell if a signature came from the same signer, but it doesn't actually reveal their identity. That's in contrast to traceable ring signatures, where it does reveal the identity of the signer if you sign twice. Good. So with all that, I can talk about the building blocks I used. There's 4 building blocks that are important to us, and it's inspired by this work of Backus et al. Now, the novel thing that we did was adding this verifiable random function to get the deterministic part of the signature. We wanted to use this verifiable random function to be able to do the thresholding part. So Backus et al. Have a ring signature scheme that is built off of this somewhere perfectly binding hashing, public key encryption, and this non-interactive witness indistinguishability proof. And we just add this new element of this verifiable random function. As a really quick overview, the use of the SPB allows for a logarithmic size membership proof. So in other words, a logarithmic size signature. And remember, we wanted to have O of polylog n or better sized signature. The non-interactive witness indistinguishability proof, or NIWI, hid the identity of the signer, but the restrictions on it are not as stringent as for non-interactive zero-knowledge proofs, so we were actually able to achieve this in the plain model. So let me go ahead and explain the shape of the signature. The first part is the deterministic part, V, which is the value that comes from the VRF. The second part is to encrypt the proof of the value V with a ciphertext. The third part is to make the ring representation compact with hashing. That's that somewhere perfectly binding hashing. And then finally, we're going to prove everything works with the NIWI. Right, so this is basically the construction of the signature. It has basically more pieces to it than the previous signature because of these extra requirements of having intersigner anonymity and also wanting to be in the plain model. So it's just a more complicated signature overall. So let me talk about this proof of membership. Basically, when you do a ring signature, the most common technique is to use a zero knowledge proof of membership or a witness indistinguishable proof of membership. So the NIWI is a proof that hides the identity of the signer, but proves that they are a member of the ring just by showing that they must know a secret key. So the breakdown of that is the proof is a statement that the ciphertext CT encrypts a valid VRF proof under some verification key in the ring, and this proof P verifies for that value V under VK. So the proof is hidden, and there is a way to open that SPB, somewhere perfectly binding hashing, showing that VK is consistent with the hashes from the somewhere perfectly binding hashing. And so with the elements of V, the ciphertext CT, and then the hashes, the hash information H and the hashing key HK, then with all of that, you can basically prove that you know one of the secret keys in the ring. Now, what the NIWI actually does is show that all the values are consistent with a signer I or a signer J. So basically what you're going to do when you produce a signature is you're going to double up on everything. So I have that value, the ciphertext, the hash information, and then some kind of random values, V prime, CT prime, H prime, and HK prime, which are not associated to any signer. The proof is just an OR proof saying either I did everything correctly using one key or another. And so that's where that witness indistinguishability comes from. It's not possible to see whether this key or another was used. An honest signer is going to use random values for the other signer that he picks because he doesn't know anything about them. So now that we have a sense of what the signature looks like, let's talk about the proof ideas. Now, the proof idea is like pretty similar to what we saw before with the threshold ring signature, where I want to swap out a signer to be a non-signer. But in this case, since I'm in the plain model, I actually end up swapping back to have it be a signature from a different signer. So all right, I have two signers, signer I and signer J, and initially that first set of values is the part that's true in the OR proof. VI, HI, HKI, and CTI really do come from signer I, and VJ, HJ, HKJ, and CTJ are false for the proof, right? They're just picked randomly. We're going to do some hybrid changes, and now I've eventually gotten to this point where everything is true except for the value VJ, which is still picked randomly. So yeah, so I'm doing a bunch of hybrid steps, and now I want to finally take that VJ and make it also true, and then swap everything back for signer I so that it's truly a signature from signer J. And if I can show that, then an adversary can guess whether signer I or signer J produce a signature with probability only 1/2. This is exactly where we ran into a problem. If I make both branches true via hybrid changes, then notice that VI and VJ are deterministic. Now, the overall NIWI will be true because it's an OR proof, and both branches are true. But with having both VJ and VI be deterministic, then it's actually possible to see that this signature is not indistinguishable from a real one. An honest signer I would have a deterministic VI, but they would pick VJ randomly. But then if VI and VJ are deterministic, An adversary can notice that VI and VJ are connected by simply asking for O-sign queries on those two signers. So this is not going to work for us, and we're going to have to do something else to make it so that we can walk through this hybrid step securely. Okay, let's try making both branches false. Well, that doesn't work because the NIUI proof is not going to be able to be verified. It's not true anymore. So that's also not going to work. Okay, what else can I do? I need to add an extra OR clause. There's something in between that's going to be made briefly true for the purposes of the hybrid, and then we can swap everything out and make it untrue. This extra clause is this relationship F, which forces a relationship between signer I and signer J's secret key using a one-way function. So I basically just want F of SKI to be equal to SKJ. Now, no honest signer would actually do this, first of all, but we can do it in the proof. And so now when we do the anonymity proof, we make indistinguishable changes from I to F and then from F to J. So basically, we can now have real signatures from signer I and then walk through hybrid steps to get real signatures from signer J. And all of the steps that we do in between, where we make our F true for a little bit, allows that NIUI to remain true throughout. This is not so great. Now, unforgeability cannot allow the adversary to register his keys because it's easy for him to pick an SKI and SKJ that have the relationship with the one-way function. And so if he does that, then it would be very easy for him to forge new proofs. So unforgeability would be trivially broken. Basically, our fix for that, because it didn't seem like there was a way around it in the plain model, was just to remove the adversary's ability to do O-register. Now, of course, this means that we lost the ability to have like a truly active adversary. But this is the trade-off that we made in order to get better assumptions. This is a flaw in our work, but I think it highlights something interesting, which is where we're making those kinds of trade-offs. It seems really unavoidable due to our use of the NIUI. So the contribution of my work to knowledge in the field is it does give feasibility of an intersigner threshold ring signature scheme, even though I had this weakened unforgeability requirement. It is also useful towards both of my research goals. So the first one was to show a threshold ring signature scheme and prove it secure in the quantum random oracle model. You'll notice that all of the assumptions I use, like the SPB, public key encryption, the NIUI, and the VRF, they are not specific hardness assumptions, so they can in turn rely on quantum secure problems. So this is a quantum secure threshold ring signature scheme as well. Of course, it's not proven in the random oracle model because I have the plain model, which is in general like a more desirable setting to have. But it does help towards that goal. And towards research goal 2, I wanted a traceable compact ring signature scheme in either the common reference string or random oracle model. So I don't yet have a traceable ring signature scheme, but I do have a compact signature because with the somewhere perfectly binding hashing, I was able to achieve an O of log n size signature. So even though I don't answer the research goals directly with this work, it gives me evidence and forward paths towards answering the remainder of my work, which is going to be that traceable compact ring signature scheme. That leads me to my final work, compact traceable ring signatures, which rounds out the whole thesis. So a traceable ring signature means that if a signer signs twice, their identity can be revealed. So this is in contrast to what we had before with the linkability or intersigner anonymous, where you could only tell that the same signer had to sign twice. However, similar to that previous work, the ring signature is a proof of membership, which it makes sense that what that comes out to is the signer is just proving that they know a secret key associated to one of the verification keys in the ring. And this is a statement that the signer can sign in zero knowledge with the statement of the ring and the witness of the secret key. The way that we achieved the traceability of our protocol was through the use of Sigma protocols. Let me explain what a Sigma protocol is real quick. So a Sigma protocol is an interactive proof system that has zero knowledge. So let's say that Alice has some sort of secret and there's some public information associated to it, which everyone in the world knows. Now, Alice can commit to that secret, and the verifier, the world, can send back a randomly chosen challenge. Alice is going to respond. The verifier is convinced that Alice must really know that secret because otherwise she couldn't have responded to that random challenge. Sigma protocols have a property known as special soundness. Soundness basically means you can't prove something false, and the way that we show that Sigma protocols have special soundness is it takes two transcripts. So if you are given the response for two different challenges, but the same first message come, it's actually possible to extract the secret. This is normally used as a proof technique to prove that a Sigma protocol is sound and that you can't prove something false, but I realized that it was possible to use this technique as part of my protocol itself. You can squash the interactive zero knowledge Sigma protocol into a single transcript via the use of the random oracle. Good. So now, let's see, if you're following along, I somehow want to force the signer to use a COM that stays the same between multiple signatures so that we can use special soundness to extract the signer's key. So let's walk through this special soundness a little bit. Okay, with two transcripts, let's say COM, CHAL, and RESP, and COM, CHAL prime, and RESP prime, it's possible to use special soundness to extract the signer's identity, which means if Alice signs once, it hides her identity. That's what we want in a ring signature because the Sigma protocol is zero knowledge. But if she signs again, she's forced to use the same COM, a different challenge, and a different response, which allows anyone to extract the identity. Now, previously, when I talked about proving membership in the ring, the signer was basically proving I know a secret key associated to one of the verification keys in the ring. That actually doesn't change, but for the Sigma protocol, the part that I added, I am going to make a proof that proves that I know one of the verification keys associated to one of the verification keys in the ring. So here, the verification key is actually the secret that the signer is trying to prove that they have knowledge on. This all hooks into a proof note saying that they know a secret key associated to that verification key. But this is like the main key point of the Sigma protocol is that it only proves the verification key. And with knowledge of the verification key and forcing that first step to be the same, a signer that signs twice has that verification key revealed. Good. So that's like the main point and the key contribution of this work is this different technique that we had, because it actually turns out that there are other compact traceable ring signature schemes, and we just showed an alternative method for how to achieve it. So I'll finish here with my contribution in this work, which is, well, I just show a different method for compact traceable ring signatures than has previously been seen. And my research goal 2 was answered. I've shown a scheme that achieves a compact traceable ring signature in the common reference string and random oracle model. So although I have not gone into details about how I use a common reference string or random oracle model, it is there. Now, and then finally, just to make sure that this is clear, the way that I achieve that compact ring signature size is by using a technique very similar to my second work, where I hash the ring description into a tree. So previously we had the somewhere perfectly binding hashing, and that's very similar to what we do here with a Merkle tree. And they're more or less the same thing. So that's it. I'm just going to summarize my work, which is I did threshold ring signatures, new definitions in post-quantum security, whereas previous work only had passive security and didn't have post-quantum proofs. I did logarithmic size linkable threshold ring signatures in the plane model, which previous works were linkable but didn't consider intersigner anonymity nor scoping. And then finally, I have compact traceable ring signatures. And I actually showed a compact traceable ring signature scheme under general assumptions. My technique is different than ones previously seen in the literature, and I think is kind of interesting in its own right. So, with that, I have answered both my research goals for threshold and traceable ring signatures in different models. With that, my conclusion is just my thesis statement was there exist traceable and threshold ring signature schemes that are secure against active adversaries in the random oracle or common reference string model and against passive adversaries in the plane model. And this was answered over the three works with my different documents. So with all that, I have made this contribution and knowledge in the realm of variance on ring signatures. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.